Hi, this is Richard Rogers. This is a continuation of my series on the 2020 presidential election. I said at some point we're going to come back and we're going to assess the performance of my model and also give out some awards. Now that we have certified results for all the states, we will do that in this video. I'm not going to go through all of the assumptions of my model. I have them listed out here, but I will highlight two things. First off, this is a poll of polls. And second, there are adjustments in the model that are highly favorable to Donald Trump. And that's going to turn out to be pretty important as we look at the outcome. So this is the scenario as it developed in the 4 previous presentations. And I now have a comparison with the actual results of the election. Here I highlight the results. You'll notice my model was very close when it came to Joe Biden. It was off by only 0.2%. The big error came with Donald Trump. Here I was off by 3.2%. This explains why I used initially those assumptions that were favorable to Trump, because the same thing happened in 2016. There was more support for Trump than people realized. People who looked like they were uncommitted or undecided at the last minute switched to Trump. And that's what happened as well in 2020. There were a bunch of people that were not picked up, their commitments were not picked up in the surveys and moved to Trump. So those were good assumptions on my part. It created a hedge. Here we look at actual states. These were the ones that were toss-up states in the final model just before the election. You'll notice that in terms of the Biden-leaning states, that I got all of those correct. The one surprise was Wisconsin, where I was off by 3 percentage points. So I predicted 52% for Wisconsin, and Wisconsin got only 49%. You might remember from 2016, that was also the state that had one of the really large errors in favor of Trump. So the same thing happened in 2020 with Wisconsin as happened in 2016. But in other states, I was quite close in the prediction. The 2 states where I had errors were Arizona and Georgia. Arizona was one of the 3 flip-flop states. Those states were moving back and forth over the course of the weeks before the election in terms of my modeling as to whether I would classify them as Biden-leaning or Trump-leaning. Arizona eventually goes in the direction of Biden. Florida and North Carolina go for Trump. Now, with North Carolina, I was very close. I predicted 49% for Biden, and he actually gets 49%. It was a very narrow win for Trump there. The state that I was really off in terms of the flip-flop states was Florida, where Biden underperformed my model by 2%, which is less than some people's estimates, but still, I ended up classifying Florida wrong. The ones I felt with those states, I was sort of in the flow of the dynamic of the election. The one state that turned out to be the surprise in the end was Georgia. Georgia, Biden performed 1% better than my model, and that was enough to give Georgia to Biden. So Arizona, although I didn't predict it as a Biden state, not a big deal. That it went Biden, Georgia was the real surprise. One area where I had big consistent errors were in the other Trump-leaning states. So I was off by 4 percentage points with the 2nd congressional district in Maine, and you'll see I'm off by 1 to 2 points in Iowa, Ohio, and Texas. Even though I didn't succumb to the temptation to declare those Biden states like some people did, I still felt that those were somewhat large errors given how close some of the other states were. Here are the poll of polls that I was doing some comparisons with over the course of the development of my model, and so we can look at how I stacked up to the poll of polls as well as the actual results, which are posted here on the far right. In terms of the percent predictions, Real Clear Politics and myself were closest. We both predicted Biden at about 51%, which is what happened. and both of us had similar errors with regards to Trump. Uh, Trump overperformed by 3%. I noticed the huge error that happens with CNN's poll of polls. So CNN uses some polls and says these are the best polls out there. CNN ends up to have the greatest error of anyone. In terms of the Electoral College, the best outcomes were actually predicted by the Real Clear Politics no toss-up polls. So they were within 13 electoral votes of the final result. Of course, we're assuming that the result will not be overturned in Congress. This is the real result based on actually all of the votes that were counted. But if that unfounded stories of fraud take root and they overturn the election, obviously it's a different result. But this is the actual result. In Real Clear Politics, no toss-up did the best job. I and CNN did the second best job out of this group of polls. So now we'll go to the awards. The I didn't pay a lot of attention to the national popular vote. Here we're going to look at a bunch of polls that had it between 4 and 5% as compared to the 4.5% of the actual. The reason why I'm looking at both 4 and 5% is that many polls did not give us the fractions. So I rounded everything to the nearest whole number if there was a fraction. And this is a group of people that come out as the best national pollsters around the actual number that comes out. There's a few polls that you might recognize: Emerson, Monmouth, and the Tufts University polls. But some of the rest of these are fairly minor players. Many of the major players had some larger errors than we would expect given the reputation of those polls. Now the big award, the one that we're really going to work through, is the best battleground pollster. We did have to define battleground states. I ended up using 17 states or congressional districts based on the development of my model. So over the course of the 4 different times that I presented my model as it was at that particular moment in the pre-election period, these are the states that came up in that toss-up group. And you'd figure if you really wanted to know the outcome of the election, pollster would need to be smart enough to go in and look at those 17 states and see how things were developing. So now let's go to the award itself. So I took the 17 states, and from that I ended up with a total of 109 different polls. So we went through and rated all 109 based on 4 categories and then an overall poll. The predicted winner is whether you got the outcome correct, whether or not it was Biden or Trump, and you got 4 points for that. The gap of the predicted winner, you got 4 points if you were right on with the margin by which the individual won, but you got 0 if you were more than 4 points away. So my feeling is if you were that far away, you're just guessing. And then there, you would want to know if someone was close. So if Trump won a state, but you were close in predicting Biden, you'd want to give a pollster credit for that. So with the Biden gap and the Trump gap, that's what those points are for. Now, you'd want to be well in all 4 of those things if you were a really good pollster. So what I did is we added those up evenly, treated each of these categories evenly, and then add them all up. So the overall score for a pollster in a state is the sum of the 4 categories. It's a total of 16 points. And then we did that for all 17 states. So let's look at the results. In terms of the predicted winner, we have what you might think of as surprise leaders. 2 pollsters that surveyed all of the states, because I know for sure with SurveyMonkey, they're using an online survey, and I assume the same is true with Swayable. So they ended up 1 and 2. SurveyMonkey predicting 13 of the 17 states correctly. Then there was a 3-way tie for third with Civics, Emerson, and New York Times Siena. In terms of the winner gap, here you'll notice some changes. So here is where Emerson and SurveyMonkey flip. So SurveyMonkey got more states correct, but in terms of predicting the gap correct when the gap was correctly predicted, Emerson actually did a better job. SurveyMonkey was tied for second with the Trafalgar Group and YouGov, and Change Research came in fifth. Now we'll look at the Biden gap. SurveyMonkey was number one. We had a three-way tie in second between Emerson, Morning Consult, and New York Times Siena, and then YouGov finished fifth. The Trump gap category is really interesting because so many people aired there. SurveyMonkey ended up number one with a three-way tie for second between Trafalgar, Emerson, and Swayable, and Atlas Intel appears in fifth place. So now for our best overall pollster. Here's our big surprise. Number one went to SurveyMonkey. They used their online panel and they weighted the results and they got the best outcome overall across our 17 states. Emerson, our more traditional pollster with a strong reputation, was number two. YouGov, which does a lot of polling research, including the Economist poll, ended up in third. Swayable, slightly behind in fourth. And Trafalgar ended up in fifth. That was a kind of an interesting one. You might recall in at least one of the videos, maybe more, I commented about a group of polls that seemed to be throwing off all of the numbers. I'm not the only person who said that. It looks like they were throwing things towards Trump. It turns out Trafalgar was more accurate than many of us realized. And so they end up in fifth place. There is a question here about whether surveying more states helped SurveyMonkey and Swayable. And the answer to that is yes and no. It wasn't huge. What I did is I computed the average score for polls by each state in which that polling agency did a survey. So it's in a way you can think of this as a weighted average. And you'll see that SurveyMonkey does beat Emerson in terms of that. Perhaps the big surprise is the Trafalgar Group actually scores higher than SurveyMonkey. And also, there are not a lot of polls that would have finished in the top three in terms of averages over these three. So it's not like we're excluding a lot of people. We might be excluding two or three who aren't getting mentioned, but it turns out the total points does move us that way. I decided to favor total points simply because if you wanted to be a credible pollster, you would want to be in all of the important states. So if you were just sitting there and doing 4 states, I believe it was what Baldwin Wallace did, and they actually scored high, but they surveyed in so few states that they're really not useful in understanding the picture nationally. So the more states you do, the better, but you also need to be accurate. And that gives us this surprise winner of SurveyMonkey, which I'm sure is going to shake a lot of people up. So here we are going to the final awards, and this is our list. So our top 5 are our top 5 overall scorers. So we can say that SurveyMonkey is the number 1 battleground pollster. Emerson is number 2. I also included as honorable mention any polling agency that appeared in any of the 4 categories in any place. What did we learn and where am I going next with this? So about my model, what we learned is that it accurately predicted the outcome for Joe Biden. I put in the hedge for Donald Trump, and what that did is it protected me from predicting a runaway win for Biden in the Electoral College, as happened with, in particular, with Nate Silver in 538. The thing about that is that I don't know that I can reproduce that. That was tied to a knowledge about what happened in 2016. And so when we get out to 2024 or 2028, I don't know what the dynamics would be in order to put in the hedge. In terms of awards, our best battleground pollsters are SurveyMonkey and Emerson. There is a surprising absence of some of the best known pollsters. So you'll notice ABC News, Washington Post never appears in this. Quinnipiac never appears in this. There are going to be two more videos in this series. One, which will happen very soon, is the Georgia Senate runoff. In that one, there's some really interesting things happening in the crosstabs. So we will take a look at that. Also, sometime next calendar year, I hope to get a chance to review one or two pollsters as their data gets put into the public domain. So that's it for now. Thank you for taking time to watch this and hope you'll drop in again. Bye.